All right, in this little tutorial, I'm going to go through a few different approaches of bookmaking. Bookmaking is a really complex thing, so we're not doing the real fanciest, most detailed versions. I'm thinking mostly of sort of bookmaking approaches that the average person with mostly average materials could adapt some of these techniques at home. All right, we're going to start with real simple, and we're going to kind of get a little bit more complex as we go. All right. The first technique I'm going to use is where we're going to use one piece of paper and we're going to turn that into a very little book. Okay. So I'm simply going to take my piece of paper. I'm going to fold it in half one way. And I'm going to open it up and fold it in half the other way. And then I'm actually going to go back to that one, fold it in half, and then fold it in half again. So what I've done is I've broken up that piece of paper into 8 sections. And you can do this basic technique with really any size paper. That doesn't matter a whole lot. You know, something rectangular. I think even, yeah, a square shape should work. If the proportions might be a little bit different, of course. But the same basic thing should work. I'm going to draw on it at this point. That's just to kind of point out what I'm about to do. It's not really a step that you need to do on yours. So what I want to do is I want to cut a hole along the crease from there to there. So we've got that intersection of creases there, got that intersection of creases there. So that's what I want to do. So what I'm going to do that is fold the paper in half right there, and then just simply cut along that crease until I get to the other crease. What that does is that has put an opening in kind of the middle of my paper. It's almost like a mouth, all right? So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half again. So I've got that opening at the top, and I'm going to essentially push the sides together until that opens up, but then kind of closes the other way. And that kind of goes around those pages. And then I can just kind of fold that section over as well. And that will give me a little book. You know, it's not the fanciest thing, all right? It has openings between the pages. You could like glue those or staple those shut if you wanted. But it's pretty fun to, you know, one piece of paper that you could turn something into a little booklet. A lot of zines are made this way. You know, it's just a fun little project. You'd send your friends little notes or books with that. Another one-page technique that we can do is it's kind of similar, but it's got a few more folds. This is kind of like a type of an accordion book, but it's a little bit different. So essentially, I'm going to take the paper and I'm going to fold it in half twice in both directions. Okay. Up. That way. Half again. So now I have twice as many sections. So now I have 16 sections on my paper. So you can see that. So what I'm going to do now, again, I'm going to draw in here, not because you need to draw in here, but just to kind of show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut along this crease, starting at the bottom until I get to the last intersection right there. Okay. And then the next section, I'm going to cut starting at the top. And I'm going to stop right at that last intersection. And then I'm going to start at the bottom and cut up and stop right there. Okay. So just like that. I'm not doing the fanciest, neatest, most perfect job of this. I'm just kind of being very functional, very just kind of quick and to the point so that we can fit a lot into this video. Again, this is another technique that will work with basically any size of paper. You know, depending how big or small, it could get a little trickier to do the folds, but it doesn't need to be something real specific is what I'm getting at. So we kind of have this like letter M shape now. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm kind of paying attention to each one of these little sections. and I'm going to fold it up. And what I want to always do is kind of go back and forth in my direction. So right now, I'm just going to go with that crease. I'm going to fold under, and then I'm going to fold over, and then I'm going to fold the whole chunk under. Okay. And then I'm going to continue down the next thing. So that was under, the whole group of everything is under the sheet. So over, under, over, under. Your creases should be pretty good guidelines, but you might have to kind of make some folds go the other direction than they were. So over, under, over, under, over, under, over. Okay. So again, we've got a little book. You know, some of the pages are kind of have some weird folds to them, but it does kind of work like a little book. Kind of fun. Some people, especially because this one is a little looser, you know, if they want to keep it in that book form all the time, they might throw a few staples in the edge so it, you know, you can flip through it a little bit more. Just kind of depends what you want to do with it, but that's the basic structure there. Okay. Next little booklet we are going to do, I guess we will go into this method. With this method, I've got what's holding the book together is a rubber band and a stick. And then I essentially have two holes going through the covers and all my pages. In this one, I just used some cardboard from some frozen food that I had to kind of make the outside covers. And you can see I made them a little bit bigger than the pages on the inside. I kind of like to do that from time to time, helps keep the pages a little bit more protected. Just kind of overshoot the cover and make it bigger. But you can do whatever you want. You can use a thicker cardboard, you know, whatever makes sense to you. But I'll kind of go through, you know, I'm not going to do every teeny tiny little step, but I'll give you enough that you can kind of figure it out. So I've got the parts of a book right here. So I've got my pages that I already have some holes punched in them. Okay. That's going to be something we'll be working with. And then I've got my front and back cover. This one I'm going to use some harder cardboard. This is just matte board for like matting photographs or matting pictures that you frame. And I've got one that I've punched two holes in on the end. That's this one. All right. And this one I've punched two holes in, but I've also made a slit in the matte board so then that can open like a cover. So this one's going to be the solid one's going to be my back, and this one's going to be my front that opens up a little bit more. Okay. So what I'm going to do actually, and I've got my rubber band, I've got this binder clip. This binder clip is kind of handy holding these pages together and getting those holes to line up. Sometimes I use something skinny to make sure they're really good to go. Oh, I'm goofing it all up now. I've used a relatively smaller hole punch for this, so that's why the holes are a little bit trickier to get lined up, but it'll be okay. All right, so with those holes a little more lined up, I don't need this string necessarily for this one. I'm going to put my binder clip back on and just kind of hold those in place a bit more. All right, so I'm going to start with my front cover, got my rubber band, and I'm using, this is just a cut wooden dowel, but you can kind of use anything for this part. I've used chopsticks before. You could just use a pencil, you know, something that's just going to be pretty solid. That's going to help kind of hold a lot of this in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the end of this through the rubber band, and then I need to get this rubber band through all of these holes. Now that seems really tricky, and it is, but I'm going to show you something that can be kind of helpful. And this is where, you know, it depends a little bit on what you have at home. You could use a paper clip. You could use even like a twist tie from like a grocery store or something like that. I'm going to use a pipe cleaner. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this through my rubber band just a little bit. I'm going to kind of use my pipe cleaner like a sewing needle. So I'm making a little hook around it, and then I'm just going to twist that pipe cleaner. And this is going to help me pull the rubber band through all of those little holes. Again, you might want to use bigger holes. I don't know. I just have a smaller hole puncher, I guess. So again, put that on the stick. Okay. And then I'm going to first just get this through the cover just so we can kind of see what we're doing. Right, so that's on there like that. And then I've got the rubber band and my pipe cleaner coming through on the other side. So then what I need to do is I need to get this rubber band through all of these holes and then my back cover. All right, so getting that through there. Oof. That all the way through. All right, so I've still have my stick on the front, got my rubber band coming out the front. I can probably take this binder clip off at this point. And then I need to also go through that back cover. Let's see what part do I want to show out. I'll have the blue on the outside. All right, pull that rubber band through there. And then we need to then get this. So we're looking at the back now. Then we need to get this rubber band and everything through that other hole. Now, it might be a little bit tricky to get everything to line up. Do the best that we can. You might have to kind of feed it through a few pages at a time. It might be difficult to get it through all of them. You know, it might look like a little mess what I'm doing, but hopefully you get the idea. All right, it's a little tricky sometimes to stretch that rubber band enough. That part where the pipe cleaner is most twisted is a little thick, so I'm kind of having to pull it through just a few pages at a time. Gotten it. It's the trickiest part of this whole book. The basic concept is not too difficult. All right, so now getting that rubber band through on the other side, and I just need the other end stick. And then just got to untwist that pipe cleaner. If I can. I twisted it pretty tight. There we go. All right, there we go. So we've got that stick is holding the rubber band. It's coming through the top, through all of that part, along the back, and then back through there to hold that in place. All right. And again, this piece of mat board, I kind of scored an edge with an X-Acto knife on the inside, so that opens up nicely. And then I've got my little book. This one looks pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with it. And my pages in here, I like to make these sketchbooks with a variety of pages. So I've got a section of color pages, a section of blank white pages. This section comes from a bunch of failed photocopies that I hold on to. And then I have these random sort of speckly marbled pages from when I was doing some experiments marbling. And there's some wallpaper in there as well. So a nice little variety. That's just kind of how I work. But you can see this one, I made the pages the exact same size as the cover, which, you know, looks okay. But those edges are going to be a little bit more exposed to maybe getting beat up a little bit. So, you know, it just kind of depends what you're making these books for. Is it something that you're going to be traveling around and being kind of rough on, or is it something that you can keep on a shelf and it doesn't really need to be all that super protected? But I like the way that looks. These are great to make for people for presents. All right, that's that one. Let's see. I guess the next one we'll do is actually a simpler one. I guess I lied before when I said we're going to go from simple to complicated. We went a little more complicated and then just we're going to do a super duper simple one here. And this one, we're going to use a similar, it's going to be a similar size book. In fact, all the ones we're making today are a pretty similar size. They can all be adapted to be a million different sizes. So the main key in this one, you probably could use a regular size stapler, but I use this really big, super long stapler to do this one. But since it's a smaller book, a regular one might work. I actually don't have a regular sized stapler at this point, but that's all right. So I've got this paper. So this is all going to get folded in half eventually. So that's going to be the size of my book. So when I cut it, I just thought double width of what I wanted the book size to be. And I'm just going to, again, use a book where I've got some cardboard from a cereal box. All right. And, you know, depending on what sort of style or aesthetic you're going for, you might want to keep that, you know, imagery on the outside, or maybe you'd like the brown more on the outside. So you've got something blank that you can do. But essentially all I'm doing here is I'm putting this over top here with my stapler. There is a thing where I can kind of set it to be a certain dimension that it's going to staple at. So I have it set to 4 1/4 inches, and that's because my whole length here is 8 1/2. So half of that, I want the staples to go right in the middle of that book. Sometimes I might fold it first ahead of time, but I think this one I'm just going to do the staple first. So just line it up there, staple there. All right, simple enough, and then fold the whole thing in half. And that's a nice, real simple little sort of pocket-sized sketchbook. It's not too thick, it's not too big. I like to have sketchbooks with me at all times, so this is a nice way to do that. And I just use blank paper for this one. But, you know, of course, you could do any kind of paper you want. All right, so that's that book. All right, now we're going to work towards what is our most complicated book that we're going to talk about right now. And that is a book that involves some stitching and involves some different parts to it. But here's a finished sort of version of that. This is a book I made a long time ago. Actually, I've used as a quote book for my wife. Whenever she says something silly that makes me laugh, I put it in here so that we can remember it. But and I've just used some really basic thicker cardboard to kind of use as the covers. And you can see again, I've made the covers a bit bigger than the pages so that there's a little bit more protection for them. But that's what we're kind of working towards, is something like that. But yeah, you can see on the binding, there's lots of stitching happening. That might look kind of crazy. Not necessarily the fanciest one I've made. And you could cover this up. You know, you could very easily, you know, glue a piece of paper or a piece of fabric over that if you didn't want that exposed. I kind of like, you know, seeing the nuts and bolts of things from time to time, so I didn't really worry about that too much. But what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make these sections of books that are going to end up a little bit like this, where we've got stitching going right down the middle of the 2 pages. So we are working with that same size again, that wider size that's going to then get folded in half. But yeah, and then the ends of the strings we want them to always be on the outside. That doesn't goof us up when we're trying to make art or whatever else on the inside. So I've got a few of these sections already, and then I'll walk you through how I've made that section. So I've got a blank section. I've got a section that I made from just cutting pages out of a book that I didn't want anymore. I'll maybe explain why I would want something like that. Another blank section, and then I've got another one of my sort of marble paper sections. But the new section I'm going to make, I'm going to use my different colored paper. So I've got my different colored paper here. So each one of these sections, Roll Fancy bookmakers will refer to those as signatures. So each section is a signature. I'm not really sure the origin of the use of that word in this case, but that's okay. All right, so I've got my yellow sheet on the top. I've got my blue sheet on the bottom. I'm not going to fold the whole chunk of those pages, but I'm going to fold that top and bottom because that crease is going to be a little kind of helpful later on. Go on the top, go on the bottom. And then I'm going to use a needle and thread to stitch those pages together. Now, depending on how many pages you're trying to stitch together, you might need to make the holes beforehand to go through there. If you wanted to do that, you could use, the proper fancy bookmaking tool is something called an awl. You could use the pointy end of a compass, or depending, again, if you're not doing too many pages, you might be able to just jab it with a needle. Now, if we look at this one, because like I said, we want the string ends to be on the outside. So that means we need an even number of holes so that we can go out, in, out, in, out, in, and end up on the outside, okay? If you wanted to, you could measure it out and make your marks so all of your stitches are nice and even. I'm going to keep this real simple. I'm not going to worry about that too much. I don't need it to be super duper exact. So my needle, I've got the string through there. I've got a knot on the end. Probably need to trim a little bit more of this off, actually. What do I have there? All right. So I want the blue on the outside. I want the yellow on the inside. So I'm going to start on the outside with the blue. And this is another case where if you want your pages to stay, lined up, you might want to get a binder clip or something to just kind of hold them while you're doing your other work. So I'm just going to start near one edge, and I'm just going to gently poke my needle through right at the crease. And I'm going to pull it through till I get to that knot. That knot might be a little too small. Well, I'm just going to leave that out for now. Leave a little slack because I'm going to tie a knot. So then I'm coming back through this side. It's up to you how big you want your stitches to be. I don't know. Again, I'm not being super exact about this. So I'm just going to go a little bit, maybe 5/8 of an inch, something like that, 1/2 an inch. Ooh, make sure you don't pull it all the way through. All right, so then with that, the end of the string and where I've just pulled through, I'm just going to tie 2 knots. 1 and 2. Just clip off some of that extra. A little extra. Don't cut it too close to the knot, or the knot might come undone. That's attached on there. That's good to go. And then I'm just going to continue my stitches. All right. So go about the same distance again, as well as I can. One side. Over. Going back and forth. Again, trying to keep my stitches about the same size. but I'm not super worried about it. You know, stitches are going to be on the most inner side part of the book, so it's not going to be super visible. So it's just kind of up to you how meticulous you want to be about this. Are you making this book to have a super duper fancy book? Are you making this book to use it for something else? It's just kind of, you know, your own preferences. But I'm just trying to show basic techniques. You know, if you wanted to measure it out, you certainly could. So I do want to end up on the outside here. So I'm going to, my stitches are going to get a little weird here at the end, but that's okay. This can be weird too. So I just need to make one little more section there. All right, so again, my blue is the outside. So with that stitched through, I'm just gonna take this needle and go through that last little loop there, and then use that to tie in 2 knots. One, I'm gonna go back through my loop. 2. I don't do any super duper specific kind of knot. There might be a fancy bookmaker's knot that people know out there. But again, I'm trying to keep it pretty simple so that most people could do this. All right, take my binder clip off now. And now that gives me my nice little signature. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. Okay, you could make, or signatures, if you want to be fancy about it. You can make as many as you want. It just kind of, again, depends what sort of book you're wanting to make. I think 4 is plenty. All right, I should say 5 sections. 5 is definitely plenty. Figure out what order you want your sections to be in. I think I want the colored pages at the end. Maybe that's the order. All right, so I go blank, marble, typed pages, blank, and then color. Okay. So now to attach all of these sections, we are going to get into using some glue. I'm just going to attach 2 sections at a time. First section, second section. All right. For this, I'm going to use just strips of paper that are the same height as these pages, and it's about 2 inches wide. So we want to have about 1 inch overlapping on each part. So we're just going to, I'm not even going to worry about folding it necessarily. I'm just using regular old Elmer's glue wall for this. Again, there is like fancy, you know, acid-free glues for real fancy bookmaking, but we're just being real simple here. So I'm just going to put a line of glue on one signature of pages, line of glue on the other signature of pages. I think I will fold this ahead of time. So I'm going to fold that in half. All right. And then I'm just going to have the crease of that go right against the edge of those pages. All right. And we're just going to bring this over too and put that right on top. All right. So those are being joined together just like that. I don't know how well that's bring it closer to the camera. So that's how those are glued together. And I'm just going to do all the sections like that, essentially. So I'm just going to attach the next section the same way. Got my strip. That in half. I guess it doesn't really matter if you're putting the glue on the pages or on the strip that's attaching them. Just, I don't know, whatever your preference is, but I'm going to try it both ways. Simple as that. Just keep going. All try not to use too much glue. We want this book to hold together, but we are just gluing paper to paper. Shouldn't need a ton of glue. Every once in a while, I try to make sure those backs are pretty nice and even there. All right, got one more section to add. Can't forget these nice colored pages. Okay, then fold this in half. Glue here, glue here. And I'm really going to do this same sort of technique to attach the covers as well. Now, what we have there is we do have a nice chunk of pages to hold it all together. Okay, that's a pretty nicely sized little book there. But yeah, my covers, where did I put this? Oh. So my cover pieces, again, are a little bit bigger than the pages themselves. I like to have that little bit of leftover space. So I'm going to, again, use these strips of paper, attach, so fold that in half, and glue here, glue here. So I want the edge that is meeting the spine of the book, I want that to line up. I want the overlapping to be on the side where it opens, like that. Okay. So do this on the back. Paper, fold, glue, glue. I might use a little too much glue on that one, but that I think will be okay. Now you want your front and back covers to line up. You want that spine to all be the same spot. All right. And then that's most of the construction. From here, again, you've got a few options. What I would suggest doing before going ahead and using this book is to either put a bunch of things on top of it, all right, and let that glue dry between the pages. Or if you have a book press or something like that, you can do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 2 or more binder clips that hold this together. So I'm going to put a binder clip on one side like that. Let me dig up another one. Binder clip on the other side like that. I might put one more in the middle, but before I do that, I actually put a little bit more glue over top of that. That's just going to give kind of sort of a little protective layer over everything that's holding your book together. Again, you might, there's like fancy bookbinding glue out there you can use if you want. But I think this would be good enough on its own. So I'm going to put one more binder clip over the top and in the middle, just like that. And that's basically that. So when that all dries, that'll give me a book like I showed you before. So be nice, open up. I like this kind of book because it can lay pretty flat when you're working on things. That's pretty nice. It's just, I don't know, just a good size. I like that. And that is our real basic approach to bookmaking. Real simple materials. I think the fanciest thing I needed was a needle for that last book. Again, there's that stapler, but I think if you're making a smaller book, you won't necessarily need that big stapler. And that's it. Thanks for hanging out with us today.